Hi guys, welcome to the video and welcome to Gatwick Airport in the UK, runway 26 left, and also welcome to the Boeing 767-300ER, which is the subject of this, and this is by Flight Factor for X-Plane 10. Also we've got here the Air France livery. Worth mentioning is a very nice livery. I have done two previous videos on this aircraft, which I recommend you go and have a look at if you haven't already seen them. One is looking at the exterior modelling, as we see here, which is very fine. A few discrepancies in it, but other than that it's pretty good. However, the second video is looking at the cockpit. So here we are then in the cockpit, and we're going to mention a couple of things before we go any further. The first being this rather nice gadget down here. Now this is a duplication of this menu here, all bar the last one, the checklist. The reason the checklist isn't included is because it's a separate list that is, if you like, linked in with the functionalities that you may wish to go through in terms of the checklist. So for example, you can go to Procedures Power Up and it will go through all these and it will follow you as you do so. However, the thing I'm going to concentrate on for the next minute or so is this. This is the 767-300ER main menu, and as you can see it's got a number of options, and I did go through most of these in the previous video. However, I'm going to mention a couple of things for this. The first thing is the volume. At this point I always turn it down. I don't know if you can hear it in the background. It's very quiet at the minute. But we end up with the terminal noises in the background, which is very odd considering we're sat on 26 left at Gatwick. Just doesn't ring true for me, so I generally turn that down at this phase. In terms of ground, I generally don't have to do much at this point. Airplane, I generally turn the wing flex down as well because I don't want to look like a bizarre flapping bird that's broken its wings. Failures, we haven't got any to worry about. Avionics is the key one that I'm going to talk about now. Now, if you see it greyed out, it means you can't do anything with it, you can't click on it. However, what I would say is that that's not greyed out, is it? For those that are greyed out, you wouldn't include it in the list unless you intended to put it into the sim. So at some stage I would assume Flight Factor are going to include these features. However, if it's not greyed out, then you can select it. You can see there's quite a lot of customizability where you can customize the sort of panel as you see fit. However, the key one here is this one here, the Pip Fmc. Now the FMC in the 75 and 767 had two variants. It had the original, and you see if I hover over this it will say original or PIP down at the bottom. The sort of terminology developed later on to be the Pip Fmc and the non-Pip, which is the original one. The same FMC was developed on to become the Pegasus, which was then used in the 747, 400 and also the 777. So even some of the relatively modern 777s, for example, still use a variant of this FMC. There are some differences. Modelled in terms of screen layouts and functionalities that are available. For this, we're going to keep with the Pip Fmc, and we are going to use it of a fashion. So really that's about all that we're going to discuss with regards to that. What I will say is you must select which FMC you are using before you start setting up the navigation equipment. The reason being, obviously, the FMC is a critical part of the navigation equipment, and you can't get halfway through doing something and then change your mind. So if you want to change between the two, do it right at the very start. Not a biggie, but obviously it's something just worth bearing in mind. However, what we are going to do just very quickly is go through a couple of defined terms, and quite often these things are used interchangeably, but they are key and distinct in the way they are. FMC, FMS and CDU. Quite often people use the wrong terminology for what they're describing, or they just use it interchangeably, but people generally get the understanding of what you're on about. The FMC, the flight management computer, is very similar to the innards of a desktop computer, hidden away, tucked away. You don't have any direct sort of poking and prodding with it generally. You don't get any direct visible indications from it, and really you don't poke around in the box. And the FMC with these things are tucked away in the avionics bays. However, the key thing here is we are going to mention the fact that the 767 actually has two FMCs. Although it has two screens, don't get that confused with the fact it has two FMCs. It has a left flight management computer and a right flight management computer. And in general terms, this is where one of the areas differentiate between the non-PIP and the PIP. It's just the cross-referencing between the two systems. But fundamentally, in general terms, the left-hand side of the aircraft is autonomous, the right-hand side is autonomous, and the two talk to each other in order to just make sure that the information is synchronized between the two sides is the best way of describing it. The indicator as to why that system is, or how we know there's two systems is down here. You can see that in terms of our navigation switch, left-hand navigation can be through the left-hand FMC or the right-hand FMC. This is set to left-hand. And we'll see a nice little anomaly over here that if we go over this side, you can see that apparently on this one you can select it to the left and the mirrored left, where it should be left and right nav for the FMC. Or the final option is right CDU. So a little bit of a glitch there, but nothing too dramatic, because actually the number of occasions I think when people are going to use these switches is largely very limited. So that's the idea of the FMCs, the fact that there are two. Now obviously to work with an FMC you need some sort of screen and keyboard, and that's all these are, the CDUs, the controller display units or the control display units. Basically it's like the keyboard on your computer and a small green screen as you would have on an old school computer. And let's face it, these are old school computers. So we've described the FMC and we've also described the CDUs. The final bit in terms of the avionics is what's called the FMS, Flight Management System. And it's a common fact that people use it as a sort of interchangeable term. The Flight Management System is the combination of all of the things involved. So it includes things like air data computers, various avionics systems, and so on and so forth. And if you like, it provides a lot of input and output elements for the whole system. So it includes the CDUs, the flight management computers, the fact that the two FMCs talk to each other, the various nav screens, the mode control panel across the top here, the various switches. That's the FMS. The flight management system is the package of everything put together. So the FMC is the hidden computer, the CDU is the screen that you can see with the keyboard, and the FMS is everything included together. So quite obviously people will use the terms almost interchangeably, but that's what the individual terms actually mean. So the other thing I'm going to mention now, although I'm not going to demonstrate it because my tablet's not set up for it, is the fact that you can access the FMC via the CDU by having an external CDU on your tablet. Android or iPad, it works with both. I've used Android. My tablet is ridiculously old. It's about 4 or 5 years old now, so it's not very good and it's not very fast. However, there's a very simple thing. If you go through the instructions that come with the aircraft, you can link it up very quickly, and you can then have a standalone CDU beside your monitor or beside your keyboard, which actually is very good. If you're doing other things on the aircraft, you can set it to sort of have a separate CDU, which is very nice. It's actually very easy to do, which is a very refreshing thing. It also adds a certain amount of element of sort of realism, if you like, into your operating of the system, so that rather than tapping at this using a mouse, you're tapping at a tablet using your fingers. Like that option, really nice, and it's particularly obviously beneficial to those who want to do cockpit building on a budget. If you have your iPad or you have your Android tablet, you can do that, which is very, very nice indeed. So this is the route. It's not actually the Clacton beacon initially direct, it's the Clacton 3 X-ray we're going to go through as a departure route, and it's a very basic route. You can see it's not very far at all from Gatwick to Schiphol. I forgot where I was there for a moment, and you can see it has decided that it's going to include the star, but it hasn't for whatever reason included the SID. However, that's the very basic routing. One of the elements with the routing, and this is why I wanted to do the routing, was this. This is the Gatwick 3 X-ray RNAV departure, Clacton 3 X-ray, and you can see that what we do here is we go around 26 left and we come around here, and the main reason we're coming around here is because it's a very unusual departure in a couple of instances. The first thing, obviously, it's got quite a few height constraints in it, but the critical one here is this one here. This is you don't often see this one, because the aim for an airliner is to get away from the ground as much as you can, because that's safer than being close to the ground. It gives you a much greater safety advantage, and also one of the things it does is airliners don't like flying at a low level. It's very inefficient, and obviously the other thing is they're restricted to 250 knots or below 10,000 feet or flight level 100, depending on which country you are in. So you can see here we've got the usual constraints which we see quite often. Speed constraint max 220, but you can also see, let me get rid of that, I get a pointer instead. But you can also see that we need to be at or above 2,500 at Kilo Kilo Whiskey 04, at or above 3,000, and then this is an interesting one, you don't see it that often. This is at 5,000, there's no leeway there. This is at or above, so there's leeway. This one is at or below 4,000. Now a lot of airliners will get to 4,000 very quickly, however you don't often see that. So it's going to be interesting to see how the FMC manages that. And X-Plane 10 as a sim isn't generally renowned for the VNAV capabilities of add-on aircraft, so it'll be interesting to see how it manages that. And then we've got some step climbs, look, so we go 5,000, 5,000 here, 5,000 here, and then all the way up to 6,000 at Dagger, and then on our route. The chances are we're not going to go much further than Dagger. We might do a climb after that, but we're going to do some handling and see how we get on. And then we may well come back and do an ILS approach into Gatwick again, just to see how the automatics manage the ILS approaches. So what we're going to do is something I don't normally do, but it is a feature of this aircraft, and it's something where we're going to go through the checklist. So what we are going to do here is we're going to go up to plugins, and we're going to go to the 7576 menu. Obviously it's joined now that, or joint I should say, now that they do the 75 and the 76. And what we're going to do is go to checklist. Now obviously it doesn't turn up on this little tablet down here. But in terms of the checklist, you can see it's got the normal procedures, operational resets, so if you want to reset everything you can. Now the normal is the, if you like, the single side of A4 that you see if you see pilots doing pre-start or after start or pre-takeoff checks, etc. You will see that they're very brief, so literally that's the before taxi checklist. Before start, for example, very brief. These are, consequently, they are not flows. Now a flow is when the member of crew goes all the way around all the various switches, so the most notable example is where they start working through these switches up here. The procedures, however, are the flows, so you can do the tutorial, which is basically, it has a little yellow circle that if I click on here, you see it comes, sorry, a little red circle, and you can see it flashes between the different ones, which is very nice. Or you can just go for the amplified, and basically if we go to reset, reset all procedures, amplified, power up, and then what you'll see is that we come up with this. Now it's what I would consider to be semi-auto in many respects. You can choose it to do it automatically, or what you can do is if you action each one, so battery switch for example, you can see it goes green and then it steps on to the next thing. So before we go any further, what we are going to do now is we're going to stick some fuel in the beast, because it's only got 4.4 tons I think it is, and ground, let me see, supposed to have that amount, so we might as well stick, we need to stick the fuel truck, the chocks, we'll stick some stairs, passenger bus. We'll put the GPU on, high pressure units not needed, and we'll load. Oh, doors, 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 open all. Can't be fussed doing each individual one. So you'll hear the passengers go on, get on, and I can do without that in the background. So let's turn it down. So whilst that's sorting itself out, we can then continue with what we're doing. So we can go up here, standby power selector, which is over here, goes to auto, and then things start to come alive. What I will immediately do is get rid of him. I'm not sure if he's supposed to be some sort of standing joke or whatever it is, but it does irk me, so I tend to kill him off as soon as I can. What I will say is that these three switches here are not mentioned that I can find in the checklist. So because we've now got power established, what we're going to do is we're going to plug the external power in, because you see here it says electrical power establish. Now it's not gone green when I've done that because it's an option. It's optional as to how you do it. You can obviously do it through the APU, ground power, however you wish to do it, but fundamentally what we've done is connected our electrical power the way we want to do it, and we'll just turn these switches on. Because they're on and we've now got power being supplied, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to turn each of these to nav and give them the opportunity to do their funky thing. What will happen is when we get down to the CDU, I should say, it will then enable us to do that. So what I can do here is tick check, and you'll see it goes all the way through. Now we're actually going to go through the checklist purely out of the fact that I think it's a relatively good set of features for those who maybe aren't familiar with flying Boeings. So amplified, power up pre-flight, nothing in the pre-flight, how odd. Let me just have a double check here. Nothing in the preliminary power up. Next, nothing in the preliminary pre-flight. CDU, pre-flight controlling. Well, I never. They've added elements in here so that. Oh, okay. Well, never mind. Your damper switches go on. What we can do if we want at this point, EEC switches are these two here. These are basically like old school FADEC. Very similar in many respects, but basically you turn them on and leave them well alone. You'd only touch them in the event of an emergency. System pressure lights are all illuminated. Left and right engine pump switches are going on. So what we actually will do, this little button up here is auto. Now what this will do is you'll watch it and it will go through various things, and when it gets to something that's yellow, basically what it's saying to you is I want you to check it. So for example it says check, so system pressure lights, we can see they're all on, so we can then come down here and click check, and it goes green and it will run through all of this at a great deal of speed. So we're going to click check, check for that one, and it goes through all of these. Now it's quite significant because some of these, for example, in relation to the hydraulics pumps, if you turn them on in the right order, it will extinguish all of the lights. If you don't, it won't. It is worth spending the time working through all of these. However, as far as we're concerned, it would take a long time for the purpose of this video, so we're going to do that. Landing altitude selector, I'm not going to worry too much about. However, having said that, we will put it nice and low for the systems because we're probably going to come back here, so 200 odd should do. And you can see it goes through all of that lot. Instrument source select panel, crew oxygen pressure, we'll assume that's okay. IRS, and it's going to wait for all of those. So as you can see, it's all starting to fire up very nicely. So at this point they're starting to fire up. We can't really check the flight instruments until they are set up. So what we can do now is we can go into here and we can start putting our route in. Now obviously with this in mind, you'll see that it's AirAx 1605 up to the May 25th 2016, so it is in date. As I've gone through before in terms of various things, you can see the model versions and the operational programs, and this is the drag and fuel factors which you can change if you're sort of that way inclined. Well, I say you can change, I don't know if you can change it, but I'm not going to mess around with this. The chances of needing to do anything with that are pretty darned slim. So what we're going to do is we're going to set our GPS position as our IRS position. And that should be that. These will spring to life eventually. In the meantime, we can go Echo Golf Kilo Kilo is where we're starting. We're not starting at a gate, so at this point, if you look at the pages, if I go next page, you can see we've got FMC positions. IRS has got all the zeros because it's still lining up, and it can tell you what nav aids it's using in terms of determining its position. IRSs are still aligning look. So let's go back to here, let's go to route. Echo Golf Kilo Kilo is pre-populated, which is right, and we're going to assume we're going to EHAM. We're not actually going to EHAM. What we're going to do then is a departure and arrival. Now one of the things I've noticed here, this is good in as much as Echo Golf Kilo Kilo has got an arrival option here. Now this is the kind of thing where if you had to replan to come back to Gatwick, you would press that button. However, what we're going to do is we're going to go for the departure. We're going to go 26 left, and if we go next page, we should be able to find the Clacton 3 X-ray. So we'll select that. We'll go back to route. We'll go to next page. Now, from there we go on the Lima 620. Lima 620. What I will say actually is the use of this keyboard. It's nice. If you like, there's nothing I hate more than pressing a button and waiting to see if it's worked, or when you try and click through, the thing can't keep up with you. It does actually do that with this, which is very nice. So the point we're going for is REDFA. So REDFA, for those who aren't aware, is a mandatory reporting point. What a mandatory reporting point is exactly as the name it says, but in this case it's a boundary between two flight information regions, and it's mandatory when you cross between two flight information regions to report. So what I'll do is I'll just bring this over here. We'll just maximise this. So let me just zoom in a bit. So here you've got the markings here for the flight information regions, and you can see along here there's a number of points. So Rinnis, Zaman, Rimbu, etc. These are mandatory positions in terms of reporting points, because this sort of hatched line here that goes all the way down, this side is the Amsterdam flight information region, this side is the London flight information region, and as soon as you cross, if you like, it's almost a territorial line in the sky in terms of responsibilities for air traffic control. When you cross FIR boundaries, it's mandatory to report in. So there we go. I have to say I've not crossed that many mandatory FIR boundaries myself, and as a result it's not something I've had the pleasure of doing too often. I have done it. Went down to Germany once in a group of Sea Kings navigating down there, which was most enjoyable, I have to say. But it's great fun talking to air traffic control in other countries. A little bit stressful at times, but there we go. So we're going to go for the Lambda One Arrival. We're going to do it through ILS 18 Centre. We'll do the Sugol transition. It doesn't really matter, we're not going to do it, so let's go to the route. Now, one of the key things at this point is in terms of we are going to activate it, execute it, go to the legs. Now you'll notice if I bring this over, actually, let me just call this up. Let's just minimise that a little bit. So you can see down here that we've got this rather odd departure, and the first turn point is max 220, so it's got that right, 220, 220, 250, and then away we go, 250. So it's got the first two turns with their speed constraints right. Now the odd thing here was that it's not often you get a waypoint in a SID where you have to be below, at or below 4,000 feet. It's quite odd in that respect for a SID of this nature. Normally, if you have at or below, it's continued all the way through to the final part of the SID. A common feature in terms of somewhere like London City, which is up here, because you're underneath other approach and departure paths for places like Gatwick and Heathrow. So if you like, there's a ceiling. An artificial ATC ceiling goes over the top of London City, so you'll find quite a lot of its SIDs kind of step up and then they level off at an altitude, but they don't often step up like this. This is one of the more interesting as an RNAV departure, because you can see it steps up at or above 2,500 and so on. We discussed that earlier. But as I say, this is just checking that it's demonstrated here, and it is. You've got 4,000 at or below, 5,000, 5,000, and so on and so forth. So it's all really very good. We do like that. Let me just sort this out, get rid of that over there. So it's all very good, we do like that. You know, it seems to be showing all the correct information, and then it goes all the way up to 6,000 at Clacton. We're not going to get there, but there we go. We do have a discontinuity, so we'll just clear that up. You wouldn't necessarily do that in real life, because what we've done is we've taken our star and we've closed up the gap between the end of our route and our star, the end of our cruise and our star. So fundamentally what we're telling the computer at this point is we're quite happy that that's going to be our final arrival. Please excuse the phone. However, in real life you wouldn't necessarily do that, and you can see it's got all the height constraints off the star and also the final approach. So all is apparently well there then. So init ref, here we go, performance initialization. These are pretty much click as you want. We'll do 2 tons of reserves. just a nominal figure. Cruise altitude and cost index. Now this used to cause me a problem. It still does cause some problems, but because of the route we're going to go fairly low at flight level 210, and the cost index will just put some random figure of 25. And it comes up with this warning, insufficient fuel. Now there's no way with 30 tons we can't do that very short route. So it does come up with this. It is a bug. It doesn't come up as much as it used to, but it still does come up. There was another what was commonly thought to be a bug, which was unable cruise alt. So you'd sometimes get unable cruise alt up here. There were a number of reasons for that. There's two real-life reasons why you would actually get that message. If you imagine you're departing and you've got a top of climb, and normally you'd have a level cruise segment and then you'd have a top of descent and you'd go down. One of the elements where you might get that message is where you pass your descent point before you've reached top of climb. So in effect you've got your climb, but your top of descent starts before you've even finished your climb. That would be unable cruise altitude, because it's basically saying in the mileage you've got available along the ground, you're not going to get to that altitude before you have to descend already. The other one, unable cruise altitude, is that one of the reasons why these big birds do a thing called Steppe Climbs. So as they go across, say, the Atlantic, you'll find that they do a step climb. It's all in relation to a thing called coffin corner, but it's basically the flight profile that you can have with heavy aircraft is limited. So you have a lower ceiling or a lower maximum altitude with a heavier aircraft. As it gets lighter, you can then fly higher. So what you end up with is this element where you can almost, well, you do actually in real life, you do step climb, but if your aircraft is too heavy, you'll get unable cruise altitude. So say for example you've told it you want to go to 37,000 feet, but your aircraft is just physically too heavy to do it, you'll get unable cruise alt as well. So some of these potentially were down to just you know, the way the systems were working out what you were trying to get them to do. But I seem to have had very few of those recently since the last update. So we've got the flight instruments there now. If we go through that, check, we'll just pretty much check everything, because all we want to do now is get airborne. Blah 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 blah. Not really overly concerned about these now. So that's the checklist completed. Pre-flight controlling. What do we got here? Not controlling. Yeah. Whatever. Auto works on that then. So next, what's it got? Before start procedure. At this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of the checklist. I'm not going to use it because it could take potentially too long. So at this point, we've done the perf in it. We've told it what altitude, etc. we're going to go to. So in this, we're going to do, let's see, we're pretty light. So let's see if we can get away with a flap 5 at Gatwick. Takeoff thrust, CFG should be worked out automatically. There we go. Pos shift, for those who aren't aware, let's assume we're in a fairly light aircraft, you know, well, really light aircraft, and let's assume this is a mega long runway. A pos shift might mean that we could take an intersection as our takeoff position. So instead of starting from the threshold, you might agree with air traffic control that yes, I can use such and such intersection. It's quite commonly seen where you've got a heavy jet and a light jet, and they want to get the light jet off first because the wake turbulence is less of an issue. With wake turbulence, the light aircraft has to wait, depending on the aircraft, but generally up to 3 minutes before it can take off. And somewhere like Heathrow, for example, you really don't want that. But what a pos shift does is you put in a value for the pos shift, so you're saying however many meters along runway 26 left, and you're telling it that I'm starting here, not at the threshold, and that's just something for the flight management computer to be programmed with that helps the pilots with managing the takeoff. So interesting thing. Select the speeds on, click them. Yeah, so we've got a fairly reasonable set of speeds there. So pre-flight is apparently complete. So let's get rid of that. Now, get rid of the caution. We don't want that. Now what we're going to do is we're just going to start it up ourselves and see how we get on. Nothing to worry about there. That can go on to automatic. That is on automatic. What was our V2 speeds again? V2 139. It's pre-populated that, which is all very good. Why is our auto throttle already on? It'd be because of the checks. Because I haven't done it, that's why. So all of that is good to go. We're going to put an initial heading of about 260 in, just in case we have an issue. Then that way we can just press heading select. So 260 will do. We're going to bring this back down to the initial climb altitude, which is 6,000 for the end of the SID. In fact, we'll bring it all the way down to 4,000. In fact, no, we will leave it at 6,000. We'll see what happens when it gets to that step. I'll edit the video to cut through it, so it's not really a massive issue. So 6,000, so all of that's ready to go. What we're going to do now is we're going to start the aircraft. So let's start firing this thing up. I always get this thing mixed up, so that goes to auto to start with. Pressure lights go out, those two go on, then they go out. Well, that one goes out certainly. That one goes to on. We're expecting the lights to go out for that. And then finally that goes to auto as well. And that should be the setup as far as I'm aware, and all three of those lights are out, which is all good. So all I'm going to do is my fairly standard flows, which mean going down here, all of this is looking good, all of this is fine there, on, that's fine. Don't mess around with these switches. These are the IDGs, integrated drive generators. Basically, as soon as you hit one of those, the generator disconnects permanently from the engine. Not physically, but through various witchcraft elements. And subsequently what that means is that you have to call an engineer and explain to them why you've pressed the switch so that they can please reset it for you. So going down here, basically it's the same thing as normal. Switches either need to be up or off. So we haven't got any centre tank fuel, so we can put those on. No need for any anti-ice, no need for the wipers. We're going to start the engine so the anti-collision lights can go on red. I actually like this switch, the way they've got red and white separate. I actually really like that. I think it's very clever. The window heats are all on, and just working our way down. No smoking passenger signs are all on auto. We've set that. Equipment cooling is fine. All of that is fine. Don't need any of that. Cockpit temperature is roaring through the roof, so we will bring that all the way back down like that. We're not going to need a lot of this in a second, so you can see the temperatures changing already, which is really nice. What we will do is we'll turn both of these off because we don't want the air going through. That can stay on, that can stay on for the minute. As I say, this is not going through the checklist, so this is pretty much just seeing how we're going, and we've got plenty of duct pressure there. So all is good thus far. Let's have a look at the rest of the aircraft as we go down. That's all looking fine and dandy. That's pretty much where we need to be. All the anticipated expected warnings. That's all looking fine. Interesting little box here. We'll come into this in a bit. This is the ILS. It's separate in this aircraft from the VOR DME navigation. So you've got your ADF here. You've got your third VHF radio down here, and you've got your various nav boxes, etc. In there, which is all very nice. So without further ado, let's get this thing started. So we're going to start number 2 first. At this point, engine start, we're just going to leave it on both ignitions, and we're going to turn that to the left. Now what we do need is we need the second engine page up. Waiting for the rotation here. You can see we are getting rotation. And then we can go this. This is a 3-position switch, so this is quite easy to get caught out with. Now these engines can start at quite a low RPM, so we'll just put that up. And engine 2 starting to power up. You can see the instrumentation working here. Because we've got the generators on, we're expecting the generators to come online, and they automatically take over from the APU once the threshold power has been reached for their operation. You can see the EPA's up now, the engine pressure ratio is now starting to indicate, so we know that we've got a good start. No nasty alarms or anything, and the needles are stabilising. So the captions are now coming off. What we're going to do is we're going to start engine 1. So make sure the starter cutout is cut out, which it has. Now I'm going to start that one. Get ourselves to a good position. You can see the captions coming on saying that the starter's on. We've got N1. In fact, it's possibly not N1, sorry, N2. Yeah, it's N2. So these are firing up now. that's all going to get very nice and good. One of the lovely touches, I like it with the 7.5 and the 7.6, is this flickering of the screens you get as the power changes over. Really, really nice effect. Here, by the way, one of the oddities here, I've noticed this before. If you look at the nav display here, you can see we've got this odd effect of a 90-degree bend. Now the aircraft won't fly that, but it's interesting to see it nonetheless. So yeah, we'll see how it gets on with that. I haven't flown this aircraft for the last couple of days, so we'll see how we get on with it. But nonetheless, we can go up here. We can see we've got 2 good engine starts. Everything else is powering itself up nicely. So what we can do now is we don't need the APU, don't need any of that, so that's automatically powering that. And finally what we can do now is we can turn these packs on like that, and we don't need that, or that. Because if you imagine, look, these are running the air conditioning system. One of the nice things is where you can see the lines of where each pack is doing what. So yeah, I mean that's all pretty good to go, really. Obviously there's the potential that I've made some mistakes, some boo-boo somewhere. Let's turn the volume back up a little bit. Maybe a little bit too dramatic there. Ground, what we can do, airplane, we can close all the doors so we don't get those warnings, and we can get rid of all of these. And that's us pretty much good to go. So only a couple of things left to do. Get 5 degrees of flaps, click on that to get it armed. We can just go up here and we can click on that, put the landing lights on as well. And that's all pretty much sorted. So what we're going to do is we're going to do our takeoff. I'm going to use this button here, the thrust button, or the throttle button, thrust button, in terms of setting our setting off our auto throttle. So everything's as we would want. Engines are stable. You can see we've got auto throttle, EPA, toga, flight director. So this is all good. Now what I am going to do is just zoom in a little bit so I can see my numbers. We get the usual X-plane nose bounce. Not a big fan of that. V1, rotate, following the flight director. 2 positive indications of a climb, gears going up. Following the flight director, get a very high nose attitude because we're quite light. Can get rid of our first stage of flaps at that point. Following the flight director, and it's going to accelerate us up to about 220 knots. Not following the flight director very well because this nose attitude is going all over the place. And at this point we'll just put the autopilot in and see how we get on. Okay, so at the moment we've got the EPA auto throttle, VNAV speed, LNAV, and the autopilot's in. And we can go through a couple of nice after takeoff checks at this point. Okay, so first things first, the gear is up and off. This has gone back to off instead of rejected takeoff. That can go away, and pretty much that's where we're at. Flaps are up. As I say, at this point, this is where you could go. You know what? Actually, I want to use the checklist. So if we go to normal, after takeoff, packs are auto, landing gears up, flaps are up, and altimeters, don't need to worry about those. That's not what we're going to worry about. Now in terms of aircraft behaviour, you can see now we've cut this little turn a bit here, so it's doing it very nicely. You can see also we've got up to 4,000 feet particularly quickly, and it is holding our restricted speed of 220, so we'll see what it does in terms of the behaviour. So yeah, I mean, to all intents purposes it does seem to be behaving as one would expect, which is nice. So we'll see what it does. As I say, it's holding the height constraint, even though this window here is really actually just a permission window. It functions in 2 modes, both as an altitude alerter, so we're telling it that, well, once we get within 1,000 feet of this, we want you to give us a C chord. The D noise you hear, by the way, is a C chord. I can't reproduce it that accurately, but never mind. So 6,000 feet is also the permission, so we've said you cannot climb above 6,000 feet. So we'll let it get round this turn and we'll see what it does, because the next stages we have waypoints with constraints on them. So data, you can see here it's telling us this is the odd one that we said, at or below 4,000 feet. Gives an ETA as well there, 1308 Zulu. So we'll turn the weather radar on whilst we're here, weather and turbulence. Now this is actually quite a nice little panel here, this EFIS panel. I do like it. If my mouse can start playing ball with me here. So you've got your map, approach, VOR and plan mode here. You can see it changing in the top left. You've also got your range here. So we'll zoom it out a bit. We've got data. We don't need NavAids airport and waypoint on it. So as we approach this waypoint now, this is our 4,000 or below. We'll see what the behaviour is as soon as we get past that. If you remember also our speed now, we were enabled to climb up to 250 knots. As the power comes in, you can see it's now trying to get us up to 6,000 feet, quick as it can. And it's not going to take long with this thing at all. We're fairly light, so we can climb all day. So there's another couple of functions. Actually, in reality, it's very unlikely you would probably fly the whole SID. Jet aircraft being very inefficient at low level, so what air traffic will try and do quite often is try and climb you as quickly as they can. So what we're going to do at the moment is we're just going to go down here, and we're just going to turn the terrain off. And you can see the terrain's gone now. So really nice little feature. If you're flying into some mountainous terrain, you've got that. It's really nice. You can see now we're at 5,000 feet because the next checkpoint here, if I zoom in a bit, you can see is to be at 5,000 feet at Sunav. And you can see actually the VNAV is behaving itself quite well. Now I have to say that the earlier version of this aircraft, the VNAV did not behave well at all. It really struggled with this departure in particular, RNAV departures. It really didn't like them. And what was happening in the earlier versions is it would just get to a point where it didn't understand FMC message is going to be insufficient fuel, which we've got plenty. We've got 30 tons. And you can see how sometimes things could potentially become an irritant, but there we go, never mind. But one of the things with this is the VNAV in early stages was struggling somewhat. The insufficient fuel, I believe, relates to the VNAV. So in effect what's happening, we don't need the takeoff at ref anymore, we want the climb page, because this is where we've got our limitations, speed restrictions, etc. Now at this point, this one here, this speed setting here, this is not something that's adjustable by the crew. It's the speed restrictions. You can manually input a speed restriction down here if you wanted, but there we go. So it's got the next constraint here, 250 at Sunav, 5,000 feet. So there we go. So it's all actually quite nice. As I say, the only bit that used to cause a little bit of consternation for me was the VNAV. It seems to be a bit better than the initial release. I seem to certainly be getting fewer issues with the unable VNAV profiles, or unable cruise altitude, sorry. And the VNAV still is causing a little bit of an issue in terms of, I think the VNAV element with this fuel is because it can't work out the fuel burns at relevant stages. So if I go to legs, reference data, you can see the fuel here. It's expecting, before we even coast out in the UK, that we're going to have only 9.6 tons left. So the fuel calculations are clearly wildly out. Why it's doing that, I don't know. But you know, there's no way this thing would burn anywhere close to 30 tons before it gets to Amsterdam. So insufficient fuel. It's worked it all out again. Look. So now it reckons that Dagger we're actually going to have 10.4, so it's actually getting better, but the calculation seems to be somewhat awry, and I think, you know, in effect, until this all balances out correctly, you keep getting the warnings. Now what I will say is, there's been, if you go onto the forums, there's been mixed sort of mixed feedback about it. Some people have had issues worse than others. However, you know, that's really, I suppose, individual people's experiences. So what I would suggest is go on the forums if you have any sort of questions about this. Now my mouse is playing up, so there we go. Magenta, by the way, not only do we have slave to the magenta line, but what we also have is we have the magenta shows the next waypoint that's selected, so you can quite often tell it's a RNAV waypoint because the waypoints are named in specific fashions. If you were to go into the big books, you'd realise just how dull and uninteresting the naming conventions are. However, you can see the next one is 5,000, 5,000, 6,000. We are not going to wait that long by any stretch of the imagination. What we're going to do instead is we are going to bring our heading bug around. We're going to plug it into heading hold, and we're also going to do a flight level change up to about 8,000 should do us. There we go. And in effect now what we've done is we've completely dumped LNAV and VNAV, and up we go. Now whilst it's doing that, let's assume that we're climbing up to 8,000 feet and we're going to come back towards Gatwick. Let's assume we've got some sort of technical problem, so we're going to come back in on ILS for 26 left, and this is where I was showing you about that little box earlier on. So if I go down here, that can sort itself out. In fact, what we need to do is we just need to make sure that we'll dial up to 50. It's one of those things that does irk me somewhat, is when you misclick in or mismove the pointer and you end up zooming the screen when you don't want, or turning a dial when you don't want. Minor irritation, but that's X-Plane, not the add-ons. So there we go. Right, down here. This is to the subject in hand. This down here is your ILS. Now, the assumption is that with most aircraft, what you do is, for this little box here, let's do it this way, for this little box here you would dial your ILS. Now the ILS for Gatwick, for runway 26 left, is 110.9. So let's see what happens if we tune this to 110.9. It's auto, so let's just flick it over to manual. 110.9. Now actually what happens is the structure, you can see here, this set of digits is only ever starting with an even. For an ILS, they only ever start with odds. So that's how you know sometimes if you tune to an ILS or whether you tune to a VOR. So that's obviously no use to us. So what we're going to do is go down here, and basically what you have to do is wake the thing up. So 110.9 it was, wasn't it? And then what you have to do is you have to manually put in the course, and the inbound course for it was 259. Now we can dial that in. And that is pretty much setting up an ILS. So when you have the VORs in automatic, what happens is in effect you're telling the system, I don't want to worry about the VORs up here, I want to worry about the FMC and the LNAV and all that kind of stuff. If you want to go back to rudimentary VOR tracking, you can just switch over like that. So you know, all is well and good. Now what we're going to do is we're going to just do a little bit of general handling, and we're going to see how the aircraft behaves. So in order to do that, what we need to do is we're going to clear our insufficient fuel message yet again. So let's get that up. Clear it yet again. Now we're going to slow down a little bit. We're going to take it out of autopilot. So let's take it out of autopilot. Get rid of all of that. We don't want any of that machinery in the way. We're also going to take the auto throttle off. Get rid of that. Now in terms of aircraft handling, it does hand fly quite nicely. So as you would imagine, it's quite a weighty beast. Now the yaw dampers in modern aircraft, generally speaking, most of them that I'm aware of also provide balance, auto balance almost, for turn and slip. That's the southeastern coast of England, by the way, down towards Dover, the nice cliffs of Dover. So as you would imagine, being quite a big bird, it's got a lot of inertia and momentum in it to deal with. We're not particularly heavy today, but we are heavy enough that you can see there's a lot of inertia. Now in terms of hand flying and stability, this is it completely hands off. You can see it's a very stable bird. We are in a descent, so let's just pitch yourselves up a little bit. And you can see that the vertical speed comes to join us gradually. Nose is coming up, so let's just trim. Right. So you can see it's pretty nice to hand fly in as much as it's very, very stable. What we can do is we can just introduce an angle of bank and we'll see what it does in terms of its stability. And the swept wing and also the dihedral on the airframe. So if I go out here, you can see we've got a swept wing. That introduces, when you have a side slip on the aircraft and it moves sideways, that introduces an uneven balance in terms of lift. So this wing will get more lift than this one if it's side slipping to that side. Likewise, you also have dihedral, so you can see a very slight curve in some respects. And consequently, what happens is the aircraft will ever so gently start to roll level. You can see very gentle, but it is just starting to roll level there, and we are gradually creeping towards a level situation. However, what that demonstrates is that the aircraft has good stability. Now, in terms of pitch, it's a lot more active in pitch. We'll just make the passengers scream, but you can see it's got quite a lot of stability in pitch. So if I pitch up, what happens is you see the speed decrease over a period of time. The nose will start to drop. You can see it dropping as it passes through its trimmed point. What will then happen is the speed starts to increase. And effectively what happens then is you go faster, you increase lift over the wings, the balance of the aircraft changes in terms of its its longitudinal balance, and what will happen is as you increase speed, eventually the nose will begin to rise. So I've still got my hands off the controls, and you can see we've stopped pitching down. The speed is still increasing, and as the speed increases, the aircraft comes back up as well. So it's got nicely damped but positive longitudinal stability. It's got slight positive lateral stability. So it's very nice but very stable to hand fly. I wouldn't describe it as responsive, but then, you know, this is hundreds of tons of aircraft. No way on this earth would I expect it to be particularly responsive at all. So what we're going to do is we're going to come round to the right. We'll do a bit of slow speed flight and see what it comes down as in terms of slow speed flight. So let's bring the power back. Okay, so what we're doing now is we're gradually bringing it right back in slow speed flight, just to see how it behaves. We'll just zoom in a little bit more so we can see the instruments, and you can see we're just above our yellow band there, so we'll start to bring some flaps down just so we can maintain a lower speed. Let's bring the nose up, let's get the speed right back, and then we'll assess its handling at that lower speed. As you can see, we're coming well down now to about 155. Let's just mess around with our pitch and our trim, just try and maintain that. A little bit of a pilot oscillation there. Now it's holding 150, 152. We do have idle throttle, so let's bring the throttle up a bit. And then that way we'll be able to prevent our rate of descent from getting any worse. There we go. So it's not particularly slow in terms of what this jet can do. You can get down to say 130 for example. However, you can see that we've still got fairly good control. It's slightly mushy. We've got a good positive nose, high attitude. It's mushier, I would say, than what we had before. Nothing too distinctive, to be fair, but there's not really that much difference in terms of control authority. However, we are still doing 150 knots, so it's not as if we're ridiculously far off the bottom of the scale. Your authority is still good. Pitch and roll authority is still great. You know, everything is looking pretty good at this point. So what we're going to do is we're going to bring ourselves around to the right, and we'll start to look for the Gatwick ILS. So just to fill you guys, what we're doing now is up here you can see we've got Echo Golf Kilo Kilo. This is us tracking in towards it, and we're currently descending down to 2,000 feet, which is the platform altitude for Echo Golf Kilo Kilo Gatwick. This is our route that we earlier ignored, and you can see we're here as we're tracking in. This ring and this line I've put on, the green line I've put on, which is an extended centre line, is actually the radial, the 079 radial. And this is a 15-mile ring centred on Echo Golf Kilo Kilo, and you can do it using this fixed page. So if I come up here, you can see that I've put If I go to legs, you can see these are our original legs. We're not using those now. The fixed page, Echo Golf Kilo Kilo, and then you can put your distance separate and your bearing separately in there. We're not worrying about altitude, we're just doing our own thing. So that is 750 feet to go for the altitude. And different aircraft chime at different points. Some aircraft will chime at 750 to go, some do 1,000 to go. So the CRJ stuff I did multi-crew in, that was 1,000 to go, so you'd often call that. But that's our fix information, and what we're going to do now is we're going to go to, let me see, init ref index approach. We're going to go for a flaps 30. However, we're not doing it into EHAM 18 center. What we might try and do actually is, I've not tried this before. If I go here, route, in fact we're going to go departure and arrival. Let's do an arrival there. ILS, next page, ILS 26 left, execute. How interesting. There we go. So it's nicely changed it for us. Look, legs, Clacton dagger, and we want the centre fix for that to go to there. Execute. And you can see it's brought us all the way back here for this centre fix. So now what we'll try and do is we'll do a direct intercept. Next page. That. Oh, get rid of that. See what that looks like on the map. Execute. Happy with that. Then what we're going to do is ignore all of that. Let's go back to our legs page now. Up here, should be able to do LNAV. And there we go, we're doing LNAV. We've changed our arrival, we've changed to LNAV. It's going to bring us in nicely. Now all we need to do is, we've got the localizer set up, so if I go up here, should be able to do a localizer. Once it's got it, it should do its relevant enunciation, so click on that for zoom in a bit, and you can see it's now got us speed on the auto throttle, altitude hold localizer. What we can do now is actually we will get well ahead of the ball. We'll put the approach in, tell it that we're going to happily do the approach, and you'll have noticed then it's gone on to all three autopilots at this point, so it's now quite happy to do an auto land approach. Just need to check that we've got the right details in as well. So all the way back down here, 110.9, 259 is our inbound course, and happy days. Look at that. Now all we have to do is worry about our own speed schedule, but it's doing it all automatically for us now. You can see the localizer position here. It's got it in hand, it would appear. So all is good. Now it's changed over to the full-on approach information. Look, so you've got your glide slope deviation here, your rad alt, and your horizontal position there. And what we'll do is we'll follow this in and we'll see just how well it does. So we're starting to get towards Gatwick, and at this point one of the things I'm just going to mention as we go is that the key with an aircraft like this is the systems more than anything. After all, it's an airliner, and 99% of functions in an airliner are automated or automatically controlled. So consequently, one of the key things with this whole thing is whether the systems work. So what we're going to do is we're going to do an automatic landing, and we're going to see. Now the aircraft is cleared to what's called or this airfield is cleared for a Cat 3B at Gatwick. So we're going to do a Cat 3B. The difference is there is Cat 3A, B and C. The differences include, for example, what automated rollout guidance you have, and that's dependent both on the aircraft fit itself and also what's fitted at the airfield. So what we'll do is we'll just jump inside and see how we're doing. Now this is our 15-mile marker that we put on ourselves. If you remember on the fix page, we put on a 15-mile marker. So at a distance of 15 it gives you a ring. So we've done all that. What we'll do is we'll bring our speed right back now, and we'll start to decelerate, because you can see our centerline intercept marker there and our final fix is there. We're at 2,000 feet. So as we decelerate now, we can bring the flaps down a bit. So with this in mind, what we're going to do is we're just going to go to initref index approach. You can see our speed's now 129 gross weight flaps. So 129 is quite a low approach speed, so odd that I click on that, it's gone to 128 look. So 133 is going to be our final approach speed, which will be nice and slow for us. And we'll, as I say, we'll do the automatic landing side of things. So what I will do is go down here. We're all cleared for it, so let's just get the range down nice and low. Now that's our centerline intercept. We're just passing that now. The next fix is the final fix. We're just waiting. We're nicely on centerline. We're just waiting for the glide slope. We can actually see it. It's lovely gin clear day out there. No bad weather at all. But what we're going to do, as I say, is we're going to let it do an auto land, because at the end of the day, this aircraft is all about systems, and that's what we want to review. And again, it's the systems that come in for a lot of not criticism, but a lot of sort of attention is the best way of describing it with these things. So half scale deflection gear can come down. And as we're nosing over, we'll start to select our landing flap, and we'll bring our speed back to 133. In fact, yeah, 133. And we'll just see what it does now. See how well it manages its own descent. Now we're slightly low on glide path. It is recognising it. Nose is coming up. Looking at the annunciator, speed on auto, throttle, glide slope. It's got flare and rollout arm, which tells you it's in an automatic landing mode, and it's actually positively engaged with the glide slope and localizer, which is why they're green. The armed modes are white at the bottom. The active modes are green at the top. So you can see here we've got our reference speed. VREF is down here with a little green marker. And actually what we're doing is 133, 5 knots. It's VREF plus 5 in light wind conditions. You can see also we've got the Land 3 annunciation up here, which is nice. Now our altitudes, if we were doing Cat 1, we'd be looking at 400 feet on the Barrow. But for a Cat 3, we're looking for 0 feet on the Radalt, which is down here in terms of decision height. So all is good at the moment. This section here, by the way, is obviously our missed approach, so climbing 2,000 feet before a left turn. But let's just have a look. I've not done many automatic landings with this, so we'll see how it gets on with this. Obviously, in terms of automatic landings, the one thing it can't do is thrust reversers. Now we seem to be... Excuse the dog barking in the background, but we seem to be very slightly offset to the left here, so we'll see what it does to recover it. See how it does. See if it's going to manage to get itself nicely onto centerline. Of course, the element here is it may be down to scenery, but we're coming down very nicely. You can see we're all centered on the magenta. We are left of centerline, so I'm going to consider that more to be a scenery error than an aircraft error. Maybe it'll just crawl us on the edge here. This is add-on scenery, so as you can see, it's very different to the gateway scenery that comes with X-Plane as standard. You can see it's taken the throttle to idle on the auto throttle. Reversers active. And we get a nice round of applause from behind. Speed's coming down. Once we're below 60, we'll stow the reversers. And we'll start to steer off the runway. And away we go. So I'm just going to park up quite quickly once I've stopped seesawing around on my rudder pedals. So let's just get ourselves here, pull ourselves to a halt. It does take a while to stop. This thing has got an awful lot of inertia and momentum, which is quite correct. Okay, Let's have a quick look outside then. What do we think about this beastie? What we do think is we can get rid of the spoilers. What do we think about this beastie? Well, it is a beast in every sense of the word. However, let's have a look at the big picture. There aren't that many high fidelity aircraft in X-Plane 10. Certainly not once you get into the airliner category. So at the moment, as I record this, IXEG have just released their 737 Classic. We've got some interesting aircraft out there. So we've got the X737, which is a free version of the 737-800, which I'm going to have a look at some point. That's particularly exciting because high quality free aircraft aren't always what they appear to be, so it'll be really interesting to have a look at that. And I know it's getting an FMC specially designed for it, XFMC, so that will be interesting. If my mouse would stop playing silly buggers here. The key now is to consider this as a whole package. It's got some very good liveries with it. The modelling is overall fairly good. There's a few inconsistencies, certainly in relation to around the engines, for example, in terms of logos, etc. A couple of people have put comments on the first video about the exterior appearance and a few minor inconsistencies. But generally, one of the things I would say is that overall, the package, the exterior package, is very good with regards to this aircraft. When you then look into the interior, again, generally it's very good. You've got a lot of the right things looking very good. However, you've got the odd inconsistencies, such as the switch over here with its odd markings. Every now and again you get a few bits and bobs where it's not particularly great. However, you do have some really nice features, which at the moment my mouse isn't letting me select, such as the tablet. Really like the tablet. The volume, by the way, actually affects all of X-Plane's volume, not just the aircraft. So just one to bear in mind. It's got some nice features. It would appear, on the basis of what we've got, that there is more yet to be developed. Nice to have variations in terms of the FMC. You can see it's greyed out now because obviously we've been using it, and therefore it won't let us alter it. So it's got nice variability in terms of the available nav aids, avionics, etc. It's got some 7 base liveries that come with it, but I'm sure there's lots of repaints going to come through the system anyway that people can use for their favourite airlines and airliners. In terms of systems, that's one of the key things. How good are the systems? Well, there's a few awkward bugs every now and again. We can clear that. Unable cruise altitude is not an issue with this. There's a few awkward bugs where, you know, the insufficient fuel, it's irritating and it's frustrating at times, and I know people still occasionally have issues with VNAV. Generally speaking, the VNAV behaviour now is much better than when it was released. I'm not going to say it's perfect, but what I will say is that actually on the whole the systems are very, very good. Certainly the overhead panel and the systems there are very good. It does have the ability to have failures involved. The avionics package that's down here seems to be very good, and the autopilot behaviour is pretty much there. Is it a study aircraft? For me, no, not quite. It's not quite at that depth, and I know some people will consider that it is, but for me I don't think it's at that depth. However, it's at the very, very high end of you know, the scale in terms of the complexity of airliners available. And actually, if I'm honest, if what you want to do is replicate the airliner world, then there are much worse aircraft than this out there. In fact, I think, to be fair, this is right at the top of what X-Plane can deliver. Now, of course, the question always sits in the back that how does it compare to PMDG? Well, it's an unfair comparison. You know, P3D, the proper version is $200. I know that you can get the academic version, but I'm not going to go there with the licensing stuff. So the correct version for most people is $200, and then you add on a $200 PMDG 777. And for $400, that buys you an awful lot of X-Plane stuff. So whilst I appreciate that PMDG are quite often seen as the go-to add-on in terms of high fidelity add-ons, there's other elements. I mean, the iFly stuff is very, very good. This is very, very good, and I would actually put this on a par with the iFly stuff in my thought process. So I suppose the overall element at the end of it all is it is a good package. Compare it to some of the sort of high fidelity stuff from PMDG, and it's got virtually everything that's there. It's got most stuff to a good standard. There's quite a lot of functionality as we've seen in terms of the FMC and the ability to mess around with it and change things very late on in the day, to mess around with it and update it and change and alter things. So apart from a few bugs here and there, nothing of which are in my opinion too major, I actually really enjoy this aircraft, and if I were to put it into context, do I think it's worth the money? If you compare it to the likes of PMDG and their very high price points, then almost certainly yes. If you were to compare it to, say, the Rotate Sim MD80, then I would also say yes. The curveball that's just been thrown into the field at the moment is the IXEG 737 300. And also the X737, which is basically a freeware 737-800, which looks very interesting. So overall, system fidelity is really quite good. Handling is as I would expect, and the overall behaviour of the aircraft is pretty good, to be fair. So with that in mind, guys, I bid you farewell. Hope you found the video useful and enjoyable, and I shall speak to you soon. Take care.